tons of incredibly powerful organizations are all over the world. But the surprising thing is all of these organizations are afraid of one man, and his name is Peter. We then see a man laying on top of many corpses below him. Then scene shifts and we see a man laying on the ground bleeding, while he has many other corpses around him. And he seems to be stating about the legendary man to an unknown figure in front of him. And we learn that this mysterious man has devoted almost all his entire life to his criminal organization, but he's been betrayed and every single organization is out to get him. But then, as he continues to state to the man in front of him, he concludes that the man right in front of him is the unknown man, which is Peter. And we see a figure in front of him with a huge head holding a gun. And here it's summarized that although many organizations are out looking for this legend, none can seem to find him. And when our unknown figure seems to approach the injured man, he is shocked at what he has seen when the unknown figure removes his mask, and then he's shot, and then scene shift to the same man who is known to be Peter. But surprisingly, it seems that he's in his elderly age and he receives a call stating that he has to take his cancer treatment, otherwise he'll only have 3 months to live. But then, still hearing this, our main character doesn't tend to the call, and instead he just continues with his library duties and states that he is okay with dying and does not regret what he has done with his life, living and fighting for the organization. And then he realizes that in all of his time, he has never taken his own picture and decides to take his own picture as a now elderly man. When abruptly, a high school girl walks into his library asking him if she can order some books and Peter humbly attends to her. The two get to chatting as Peter tends to her needs, trying to look for books that will suit her. And we learn that the girl is new in town and is a third year in a different high school. And when Peter presents the books that will tend to her needs, the girl is shook with the amount of books, stating that she doesn't even have the money for the books. But Peter, now in his 60s and being a senile old man, still insists and decides to give her the books for free. Because earlier, the girl stated that it was for a younger sibling. And then he starts preaching to the young girl that she should do whatever it takes to care for her loved ones and that she shouldn't have any regrets. And then it is hinted to us that even Peter himself has regrets that he lives with, as panel shifts to see a young girl being taken away, which we can assume that it's his daughter. And as he continues to preach to the girl, he suddenly states that she should leave before he kills her. And we see that all this time, the girl was wielding a knife and was preparing to stab the main character behind his back. But of course, the main character being Op and a renowned legend, he isn't even fazed by this and knew all along, and of course, this shocks the girl. And from here, the MC starts narrating on how he knew from the beginning, stating that he knew all the faces of the people of this town, and she was new, which already raised suspicions, and also that there were no third years in the upcoming school she was attending. So the girl must have lied from the beginning and he was just toying with her. And finally, he mocks that she really thought he didn't know the stench of blood when he has tons of years of experience in the killing department, so it really wasn't difficult to sniff her out. The girl, getting frustrated, decides to just lunge at him, but suddenly it seems that she's stopped by an unknown force and our savage gives her that hockey stare that stopped her in her tracks and willing her unable to move. And our main character, unwavered, just tells her to take the books as it's obvious she still needs them for her younger sibling. And then he continues to engage in conversation, revealing he knows that she's from an orphanage. And then he reveals he was in the same orphanage. And then, and with this information, we can also piece up that the orphanage is also linked with a criminal organization training orphans to be killers. And with this information, we can conclude that the girl was sent on a mission to eliminate Peter. And with this, Peter explains to her that if a volunteer fails to kill the target, then the organization will come up with a plan B, which is to kill both the target and the volunteer, who is the person performing the assassination. As Peter pushes the girl back and suddenly 2 men holding guns appear out of nowhere through Peter's library. And then Peter is left bleeding as the 2 men starts chasing him, pointing him with guns and shooting all over the place. And as Peter's about to pull out a gun, they hold the girl hostage. And then Peter is punched in the face by one of the intruders, and they continue to mock him, questioning if he's truly the legend he's spoken of, when a strange man named Octaman appears, stating that even though Peter may be a legend, but even legends can't escape cancer. And Peter starts to question the man, asking him why they ought to kill him, when the man states that although Peter may have been powerful, eventually old age got to him. And now they're all after his money, which is stated to be $7.6 million. And that is why they are out to kill him, especially knowing that he's in his old age and past his prime. Then he gets another punch and then he's knocked out of the way, when suddenly he unleashes a flare bomb which sends everybody blinded. And just like that, Peter is gone from the scene, and we shift to a playground park and we see Peter bleeding profusely, and as he's bleeding, he looks back on his life and narrates that when other kids were first learning to write with a pencil, he was learning how to wield and kill with a knife. When other teens were talking to their first crush on the phone, he was learning how to wiretap phone calls until his ears were ringing. And when other young adults were hanging out and going on blind dates, he was busy being a Russian spy fending for himself in the cold. When other people were getting married and creating families, he was out on the battlefield with terrorist groups and fighting for his life, and states that he was doing this devoting his life to the organization. But then suddenly when a new boss took over saying that the main character is now an old and senile man, he got rid of him because he thinks Peter had grown soft. And this is how we learn why our main character was kicked out of the organization. Although he was loyal, and looking back on all this, Peter gets frustrated, looking at the decisions he had taken with his own life, and he refused to accept the fact that he could just be tossed away that measly. What sets him off is the money that they took for him. And we learned that that money was supposed to be used for his supposed daughter. And then next thing he just lays on the ground bleeding. Scene shifts one more to Octoman's hideout, and we see the two intruders from the library chit-chatting about the previous scenario they just caused, and then they start mocking Peter as, although he was a legend, he couldn't even put up a fight against them, and start making threats as to what they would do to him if they caught him once more. When suddenly an unknown figure enters the kitchen, and as the two intruders were about to conclude that it was Peter, they take a look at him again, and they don't know who the intruder is, and the unknown figure starts to examine their own body, flexing even, and is muttering to himself when the two previous intruders try to excuse him out, regarding him as not a threat. When Peter, the unknown figure, suddenly states that he wishes to see Octoman. And with this, the two can conclude that he's also part of the criminal business. And immediately one of them tries to start attacking him when suddenly the intruder blocks his punch of just one hand, and from here, the intruder starts fighting with them. And as one tries to sneak up behind him with a knife, he quickly lashes out some blows to him, knocking him out. And as the other one also goes to grab a knife, Peter starts narrating. Being able to wield a sharp-edged weapon makes him a third class. Being able to be proficient with any weapon and all weapons make you second class. And as for those who are first class, they are able to inversely turn any object into a weapon. And feeling provoked, one of the killers of Peter suddenly starts lashing at the intruder with his knife. When suddenly the unknown figure lashes out the octopus which he was holding, and uses it to choke the man charging at him, sending him flying all over the room and finally landing him in one of the boiling pots they were preparing, and just like that, the guy was out. The unknown figure, whom is Peter, then picks up a picture of the old senile Peter and reveals that he's actually Peter, and holding up the picture, he burns the picture with his cigar, and he reveals that he, Peter, was the best killer in the organization. And when he'd woken up from when he was in the playground, he had magically returned to his younger self, which explains why he looks different. And with this, Peter has found a new resolute knowing that the organization can no longer find and kill him, but instead, he is now coming for them. With this, Peter walks off Octoman's lair and heads straight to a railway's restroom and is busy checking himself out in the mirror as other people are flabbergasted at his figure. But Peter continues to examine the sudden occurrence that has occurred in his life, wondering how he's back to his younger self, and the previous wound he had experienced from the gunshot is suddenly gone along with the cancer he had. But then he finally decides that he needs to get new clothes as the ones he's currently wearing don't fit him when suddenly two buffoons chit-chatting and smoking in the bathroom, even though the signs clearly say no smoking, but they still continue anyways, discomforting other people. Then Peter goes to call out these two young men for them to stop smoking, requesting them to go smoke outside. But of course, though they are in larger size, they start thinking Peter is some sort of child and then start ridiculing him and slapping him, telling him he should mind his own business. And with this, Peter decides to stop talking, which just somewhat relieves the two guys with their ego, but Peter on the other hand is actually going to lock the doors, and what we see next, he starts approaching the two thugs, telling them that he's gonna teach them a lesson, and as one of the thugs tries to slap him again, Peter hits him with a fist to the ribs, immediately leaving one of the big guys knocked down, and then the other one pulls out a knife, but Peter not giving a tint of fear. Instead, he starts educating the person on how to actually hold and wield a knife, and on a side note, we all know what happens when your opponent starts educating you during a handicapped fight. You're basically done for, bro. Now back to the story. And the thug, feeling insulted, lunges at Peter, and Peter is ready to tackle the attack, and with just a few swift moves, he knocks out the guy completely without his knife, and then the thug starts asking him questions. But Peter, being Peter, threatens him with his hockey stare, which leaves the guy shook, and he wets his pants, and then we see Peter has zero money in his bank account because it was stolen, and pulls up wearing a fancy suit. And in the background, we see the two thugs walking back being defeated. And then we get a little bit of a background description on Peter, stating that he grew up at Yangguang Orphanage, a small facility right inside of a small church, and 50 years. He's been in the organization, and that small orphanage turned into a large crime organization that holds influence over the realms of politics and finance all over the world. And Peter had devoted his life to this organization, and he's gonna be the one to bring it down. Scene shifts, and we see a man on a chair inside of a butcher talking to Octoman. And as the two have their little conversation chit-chat, we learn that the Octoman is actually here to kill the man. But the man also has his own backup of men who are here to kill Octoman. And the man, thinking that Octoman won't be much of a challenge, orders his men to attack Octoman. But within just a flash, we see that Octoman has dealt with all 6 of his men, and this of course leaves the thug stunned, making him jump back from his seat with a look of shock and fear. And then Octoman continues to mock his little group of men who tried to attack him. And we learn that in his organization, he's ranked B+, and his specialty is full-body contortion. And the man is left petrified as Octoman comes straight at him. And honestly, I don't blame him. Just look at that freakish sight, and then back to Octoman's lair. Octoman walks through his hallway, discusses 2 of his men being killed by none other than Peter. And he discussed this with the library girl, and we learn that the girl is still alive somehow, although she was meant to be killed along with Peter, and as Octoman opens up another door to his hallway, he suddenly sees a hidden figure, which is Peter, but he does not know of that. And Oman immediately turns to the unwanted guests as we see Peter on the dinner table eating his food. The two get to chatting, and Octoman assuming if he's one of the victims of his loan sharks, but Peter clearly states that not quite, but he's here to actually collect money, and quite an amount, which is approximately 7.6 million. And with this, Oman can already conclude that he's somewhat associated with Peter, and tells his henchmen to immediately lock the doors. And in his head, Octoman starts to question whether he could be Peter's son, but then immediately pushes the idea and instead guesses he's an apprentice of Peter. But also denies that guess, knowing that Peter always worked alone, and finally, not giving a damn, he decides to tell his intruder he has 2 choices to make if he wants to leave the place alive, and tells him his first option is to tell him where Peter is and walk out scot-free. And his second option is to receive a bullet to the head. But Peter states that he's not quite fond of those options, which this comment upsets Octoman. And instead, Peter sets his own rules, telling Octoman what he's about to tell him. Nobody has ever lived the tale to tell, and tells them that there's a third option, which is he is Peter. And he was the one that killed his henchman, and this statement immediately sets off Octoman, and Peter retorts back mocking that he's already hard of hearing at his age. And again, he repeats what he said, saying that he killed his henchman. But of course, Octoman doesn't believe his first statement and asks and questions why he was out to kill his 2 henchmen if he doesn't even have any association with them. But Peter just continues to munch down on his food, and Octoman instructs one of his henchmen to grab a gun. And then he warns Peter and asks him what association does he have with Peter. Not knowing that the real Peter is sitting right in front of him, and Peter, getting sick and tired of the games, tells him the only way for him to truly find out who killed his men and where Peter is to kill him. And Oman doesn't hesitate to instruct his henchmen to immediately grab the gun and to shoot Peter, when Peter lashes out a chopstick and it lands perfectly on the henchman's neck, leading him to die instantly. And the girl we saw at the beginning on the story, witnessing this scene, is immediately shocked at the fact that somebody her age is so skilled at assassination in their organization. But Octoman even now still thinks of the man in front of him as just a child and rookie, not taking the quick death of his henchman as a slight hint of danger. And as he tries to sway Peter with some words of invitation, he immediately pulls out a gun and starts shooting. But Peter swiftly grabs the table and hides behind it. And Octoman thinks that this is a rookie mistake, as the table is not strong enough to withstand the bullets. And already thinking he has won the duel and looking to go check on the table, he sees that Peter is nowhere to be found. And as he goes around the room checking for where Peter is, he looks up, and then suddenly he sees Peter right on one of the pillars above him, and Peter spews out hot soup all on Octoman's face. And then Oman starts suddenly shooting in random places as he's unable to see, and using the opportunity, Peter takes his chance to swiftly give a blow with his palm at Octoman's chin, and to follow up with his next move, he goes ahead and goes grab the man's neck, turning it sideways. And as he lies there almost dead, he questions as how he was suddenly defeated by a young assassin, as he's got decades of experience. And then we take a little bit of a quick flashback to his past, and we all know what happens when they start getting a flashback. We see that in his organization training, he's busy being given instructions by a higher-up. And we see that in his younger days, he developed his own moves that relates with his body contortion, and with that move, he felt as if he was unstoppable and nobody could defeat him. And recalling a lesson he was once told by his instructor, to never show your back on your enemy thinking you have won the battle. He uses this as motivation to get and grab Peter's leg and to lock him in the same signature he used when he was a child, first using his signature. And we see an image of him talking down Peter as Peter struggles and suffocates, and already Octoman thinks he's about to win. When unfortunately he sees that Peter is right in front of him. And the person who he was actually choking was his henchman. And all of what just happened was in his head, an illusion. And with the shocked discovery, he looks back at Peter, and Oda Man states a powerful group that's gonna be frequently said in the series, which is in the organization there are people called the 12 Apostles, who are the 12 most strongest people in the whole organization. And then he states that Peter might be one of the 12 Apostles, or worser, even stronger. And with this new knowledge, he immediately starts cowarding, telling Peter to please spare him. And then he gets back on his feet and tries to sell off the girl he was with as compensation for not killing him. And then Peter stops in his tracks, which leads Octoman on. And the man, already thinking that he's initiated a deal to spare his own life, immediately starts running off to the door thinking that he's not going to be killed today. But then, in his own mind, he says that he's gonna find out who the man is and he's gonna kill him. When suddenly Peter states that he should not forget what he was taught. The moment he shows his back to his enemy thinking that he has won, that's the moment you will die. And with this, the man also repeats the same lines in his head, flashing us back to his past, and finally putting the puzzles together. The fact that he's the strange intruder has a collection for $7.6 million. The intruder killed his men. And the intruder knows the same lessons that he was taught as a child. He realizes the man is standing in front of him, truly is Peter. And Peter, taking the chance, seeing that he has finally realized who he is, reminds him what he told him earlier, that anybody who has ever seen Peter has never lived to tell the tale. And Peter immediately lunges at Octoman, comboing him with a couple of blows and twisting his bones and killing him right on the spot. And then the scene shifts to a man on the rooftop doing one-handstand push-ups with a tattoo on his back. And we see that he's getting a report on recent events that occurred. The fact that Octaman has been killed, and there were no security cameras to show of this. And the man already concluded this was the doing of Peter himself. And with this man commands that he grants permission for anybody to kill Peter, foreshadowing that he might be the new leader of the organization. And then scene shifts again to a billboard of Peter in his elderly age for the citizens to witness. This may look like any normal advertisement. But Peter knows this is a bounty for all the people of the criminal organization to go after Peter, and him getting the message that the organization is out to get him, responds back saying that they won't need to find him because he'll come for them first. But first he decides to take up his first plan of action, which is finding somebody who can help him in order to take down Glory Club, which is the criminal organization. And Peter has one person in mind, but is unsure of them, as we see an unknown menacing figure with a dog right beside them. And then next up, we see that Peter headed towards an unknown and deserted restroom for men. And as he opens the door, he sees a pile of homeless people just laying on the ground, and he excuses himself passing through the rubble of people. And when he comes across a wall of many flyers, he looks for what seems to be a secret tile, soon finally pressing on something. All of a sudden doors start to open up on the wall, and we see a flight of stairs heading down a secret layer. And next, we see that Peter has somewhat entered a luxurious underground basement with lots of luxuries and furniture. And as he stares at the amazing sight, a sharp weapon is suddenly put at his neck. And we see that the person holding him at weapon point is a female character, whom Peter comments on the fact that she is blind. And although the lady is not able to see our main character, she still manages to sniff out his scent. And somehow she manages to point out that he's young and doesn't smell of alcohol, but instead he smells like blood, and putting two to two together, she concludes that he may be part of Glory Club and asking him if he was sent to kill her. And immediately she takes the initiative by starting to attack Peter, throwing moves at him. But our main character swiftly dodges every single move, and then she puts him on a wall, and taking a chance, she strikes at him with her weapon. But instead, she misses as our main character again. Instead, the weapon hits the wall. And with this, she immediately follows up with another kick, leaving the main character wondering if she's even really truly blind with the way she's throwing those moves. But then, all of a sudden, our main character catches her by the foot and then pushes her and swiftly puts her to the couch. And with that move, the unknown lady comments on how skilled he is, even though he's so young, and then she tries to use some petty tricks stating that she is blind, so our main character would never dare to harm her. Then she commends her dog, which has been standing the whole time beside the fight, to attack our main character. When suddenly we see that the main character is actually cuddling the dog, rubbing his hand on the dog's belly. And it may seem that with that confrontation, they may have managed to clear things up, and finally Peter reveals his secret to her. And of course, as he had revealed this, the lady is shocked that Peter managed to go back to his younger self, and starts examining him and asking him questions on how he had managed to turn back to his younger self, even trying to find out the secret as to go back to youth, wondering if she could also do the same. Then Peter manages to also tell her that even he doesn't know how he became young again. And also we discover that he told her about his plans to take down Glory Club, and then asks him how he intends on doing that. And our main character simply responds back by saying that he plans on entering the eye of the storm. And she questioning this motive, which he starts to explain his plan, and that is in order for him to take down Glory, which is desperately looking to kill him. The only way he can shake things up from Glory Club from inside out is for him to become a new killer for Glory Club, infiltrating the organization. And as the blind lady is about to thwart the main character's plan, she manages to realize that although it's the same Peter, the organization does not know of this cause they only know the old elderly Peter and not the new and youthful Peter. And if Peter manages to infiltrate the organization, he'll know exactly what they're planning and how they're going to be killing him right before his very own two eyes, and finally taking admiration for this plan. But then she also realizes that the plan won't work. And then it is revealed to us, the only way to become a killer for the organization is if you are from the orphanage, and the problem with the plan is that the organization only knows the old Peter but not the new Peter, who isn't from the orphanage. And since they don't know him, he won't be qualified to be their killer. But then our main character already had a backup for this problem and says that he has a second plan in order to achieve his motive, when abruptly scene shifts to a bunch of high school girls with makeup drooling over some unknown character. And we see that our main character had transferred to a new school. And then he later reveals the way for him to get into the organization is for him to also enter a school connected to the organization. Then a group of girls still continue to gather around our main character and totally simp for our Peter. When one of the girls announces that it's time to go to the assembly. And then Peter gets up from his chair to go to the assembly hall, and we learn that the school on the outside may look like a normal school. But the truth is the school was founded to foster killers. And Peter uses this chance in order for him to be able to infiltrate the organization by going to the school and being administered as a killer at the school first. When we suddenly see a bunch of students still flocking at one of our main characters, and we even see some dudes as blushing at him. We then arrive to the assembly hall, where we see students gathered up waiting for announcements, whereas our blind ally, communicating with Peter with a hidden recorder at his neck, contemplating on his plan to be noticed as a killer. When Peter gets up and goes in front of everyone on stage and still with the other students blushing at him, he goes and makes an announcement to the whole school saying that he's a new transfer student, Sanggu Kim, his only speciality is fighting, and also he's a killer. And this sends a wave of shock throughout the whole room, even surprising the blind lady over the communication line. And we see a bunch of mysterious figures up above everybody else who's standing on the hall, holding weapons and looking menacingly at our main character. And as everybody in the hall is taking a moment of shock, our main character quickly corrects himself saying that he left one important note, that he's really a killer when he comes to hitting the books. And this leaves everyone dying with laughter, as he thinks that what he just said was cringe and corny. When suddenly a big fat guy comes into the picture and starts shoving everyone out the way. And the punk calls out to our main character asking him if he was flirting with his girlfriend. And we are later narrated that this man had his girl stolen, whom he was in a long relationship with for 22 days and loved his girlfriend dearly. But today, Peter has stolen his girl's heart, and this left the man very heartbroken. And with this, the punk decides to take a punch at our main character. But then, of course, Peter just swiftly dodges it and is about to lend a deafening strike to the punk. Willingly, the punk just braces for impact, feeling as if death is coming his way, and apologizes to his loved one whose heart just got stolen by Peter. When suddenly Peter slows down the punch and only ends up flicking the punk's forehead, leaving him with a bump on his forehead, leaving the other students awestruck. When suddenly a teacher calls out of nowhere, reprimanding the other students for causing a fight during the hall. And the teacher comes to our main character pinching him by the cheek, and he asks him where his parents are. And nonchalantly, Peter responds that his family is probably dead. Quickly, the teacher takes Peter by the cheek and escorts him out of the hall. When we see the group of mysterious figures discussing Peter's announcement, which apparently they got the message as to what he was saying. And we still see the other students blushing over Peter and also his comment. And we see that the previous girl who's been appearing throughout the series also shocked by Peter's appearance into a school, questioning if he's trying to destroy the school as well. When we shift scenes and we see that the library girl is sitting alone, eating lunch outside of class when Peter arrives and decides to join her, and Peter sits next beside her for lunch. And of course the girl is shocked at this self-invitation, and the two quickly get to chatting as Peter also makes a comment on how much food she got for herself. Then we get a flashback of the previous deal Peter decided to make with the girl when he went out to kill Octoman the previous few days. And we see that Peter instructed the girl to say that his younger self wasn't the one that killed the man, but instead it was his older version. But of course, the girl does not know that it was Peter reborn. And with that deal, the girl was able to be let off to still be alive. But then she questions as to why Peter is still seemingly going after her. But Peter makes it clear that that was not his intention. But then the girl, having had enough of their conversation, decides to get up and leave, and we later learn that her name is Yuna. And the girl is shocked that the main character knows her real name. And when she looks back, she discovers that he suddenly disappeared. Then scene shifts to a festival and we see a guy named Jonathan, and he's a track star of the Shin Yongguang High School. And he set the record for the 400-meter run in high school division, which is a pretty impressive record. But then he says that today he's decided to retire his title because Peter somehow managed to outrun him by just walking. And we see him crying in the background with the other punk from earlier comforting him. And we see the girls once more flocking around him. Then we shift back to see Peter doing an eye test, and we learn that he has a 20 out of 20 vision, impressing everybody around him. And in this scene, we can see that there's a mysterious figure lurking behind Peter. And then we move to the next activity, which is sculpture cutting. And as Peter is about to prepare to sculpture his project, he somehow manages to sculpture a refined sculpture of a rabbit, leaving everybody else once more awestruck. And again, we see the mysterious figure lurking behind Peter. Afterwards, in the school backyard, we see a bunch of students making fun of the previous teacher who scolded our main character. And as the teacher tries to scold the children who are smoking, what there is not allowed at school, the students only continue to mock the teacher as they see him not as a threat, as in this day and age, you can just report teachers for the silliest of offenses, and they are taking full advantage of this, and the teacher continues to reprimand them, but they only continue to mock him. And one of these students thus hits him into a bunch of trash, and finding the scene funny, they decide to take a TikTok video when suddenly Peter arrives at the scene holding a cup and a bin, and the bunch of students approach Peter, trying to intimidate him to forget about the mess he just witnessed, but Peter only tells them to stop bullying the teacher and go away. Thus the other students also warned him to leave, but Peter, not wanting to also leave, he suddenly gets serious. And as one of the punks tries to throw a punch at him, Peter swiftly dodges and dodges and dodges more of his moves. And when he suddenly decides to hit him with a kick to the knees, his opponent falls down. And as the other guy tries to come from behind with a brick, Peter just smashes it with his fist. And we see that the students were left so awestruck that they start apologizing to Peter and decides to leave the scene, and leaving Peter and the teacher all alone. Seemingly the teacher is shaken up and again scolds the main character for fighting. Although the main character was only trying to defend him when suddenly the teacher throws a Brazilian kick from behind to try to hit our main character, but of course Peter just blocks the powerful kick. And we see that the teacher was actually masking his true identity all this time, saying that he was seeking talent and he had just found it. And truth of that was that Peter, while he was fighting with the punks, he never spilled his cup of coffee, not even a drop. Then the teacher asks Peter a couple of questions as to why he even knows how to fight like this. And Peter simply answers, he wants to get revenge, but doesn't reveal the second statement in his mind, which is to get revenge on a glory club for taking his life away. But then Peter continued to say he had lost his family, money and house, and he wants to seek revenge, not naming revenge on whom. And the teacher, hearing all of this, makes an offer for him to join the volunteering club, which is only for the school's killers. And our main character idly smirks as he knows that this whole time, and patiently waiting for the teacher to approach him because he knew he was the one, the mysterious figure that had been lurking behind him and observing him. And we learn that he is Glory Club's killer coach. The scene shifts and the teacher takes Peter along a mysterious isolated hallway, quickly explaining what it means to be part of the volunteer club, stating that only a few get chosen from the orphanage. And for him, it's a special case since he isn't from the orphanage. And when they're about to open the door to the start of the volunteering club arc, and as Peter takes a look around at the people in the club, he's shocked to see that they all look so small and normal. When his teacher introduces him to the whole class, and of course the librarian girl is shocked to see Peter here. When they lock eye contact, Peter secretly gives her a wink. And of course, Peter also introduces himself to the class when suddenly, two arrogant, burly students interfere with Peter's introduction and start ridiculing him for nepotism for managing to coming into their club although he is not from the orphanage. But then, of course, the teacher quiets them down, and then the other students suggest for a welcoming party they cook some pork, and Peter agrees as he is also craving some meat. When they all abruptly look at Peter, and it looks like they have found their piggy. Judging from these looks, Peter is now clarified they're real club members, and then of course, the previous two students try to brawl with Peter first. But as Yuna comes in the middle to stop them, they just push her aside and tell her to a good girl and sit this one out. But of course the real reason she wanted to stop them was so that they wouldn't die in the hands of Peter, which she only knows him as the guy who took down Octoman, not Apostle Peter. And as the fight is about to ensue, Peter welcomes them with open arms. But the arrogant fools brag on how many fights they've been in that nepotism boy could never be in, when funny enough in his own head Peter states he's fought a couple of battles, approximately 1,500 times. And from there the two men start charging at him with fists. But of course, Peter blocks both of their fists simultaneously, and then the two muscleheads start talking gibberish again, talking about the reason why they fight so hard, unlike nepotism boy, is that they wish to become the legendary Apostle Peter, which is quite ironic because they don't know the man they're currently fighting is actually the prime version of Peter. And they still continues to ridicule Peter, saying that there's no place for him since he used nepotism to get in, but technically he actually is from orphanage, just not the way they think about. And the two move back and take a stance and refresh their stamina, which I really wish they would stop talking and start throwing hands, maybe then they wouldn't waste their stamina. And Peter takes a stance and tells them both to come at him. And of course, this rallies them up, and the both of them charge at Nepo Boy once more. And once more bringing up experience in the fight, they brag about their measly 18 years of experience, and I say measly because hot damn this man just said he's been doing this for 65 years. And after a few minutes, we see that the crowd congratulates the two brothers whom they call the Doko brothers, which I just found out Doko means poisonous drum. And after a few minutes, we see that the crowd congratulates the two brothers whom they call the Doko brothers for supposedly defeating Peter as he apparently ran away. And we see that the two chatterboxers are sweating cats and dogs from their one-sided fight. But then we actually see when scene changes that Peter just decided to go out for a walk. When Yuna stops him, asking him if he's there to make fun of their club. And Peter, trying being oblivious to her words, the girl again states that she saw that even though they were all in combat against each other, not once did Peter clench his fist. And as Peter tries to retort back, saying that he always tries his best in a fight, the girl states once more that the other two were sweating bullets while he didn't even drop a single sweat, and we can see a clear visible point on what she means, because now man's got me wondering what skincare product he be using to shine like that. And then she hits our boy with the classic, pin them to the wall to assert dominance, move we see in classic animes, and hold up, what are the directors trying to show us right now in this scene? The man may be 16 again, but that's still a case. She then starts asking him questions as to why he's here and what he's up to. But Peter, not wanting to respond, just stiflingly ducks himself out of the situation and walks away and makes up an excuse. At that moment, when the scene shifts to what seems to be outside of a bus station, when a man is celebrating the fact that he just struck a deal for selling his bus for 1 million won, which is $743. And now when he looks at his passenger who's about to come, he's surprised that it's only one person. But then he's also notified that the person has lots of luggage bags. And when the bus driver tries to take the luggage for him, suddenly he feels as if the bag is moving. But of course, the passenger steps in, making sure that whatever's inside of that bag, the bus driver is not suspicious of, and quickly smacks away his hand and telling him, how about they play a game for him to guess what's inside of the luggage? And when they're finally at the bus stop, the man concludes to himself that no matter how hard he tries to not convince himself, he knows that the luggage definitely moved, and the thought of that made him piss his pants. The scene shifts again to see the coach telling the students an announcement that one of their biggest sponsors of the club's glory has a mission set for them. And he states that the reward for clearing out this mission would be that the students would be given a killer license, as this would be their time to become official killers for their organization. And it is stated that the mission is to save hostages, as they have been frequent kidnappings of teenagers. And now one of the victims is the biggest investor's son. And although this issue may be usually taken with the police, the problem is the sponsor wants to personally deal with the kidnapper and make them suffer for their actions. And then the teacher gives out an opening hand for anybody who may want to volunteer for the mission. But then everybody is silent besides from the two Doko brothers who seem confident enough to take on the mission. And of course, the last two is our main character and Yuna. But then the next set of instruction the teacher gives them before they go out to the mission is that their first step is to have a blast at the park. And we see that they're all at the park wearing ridiculously and charming clothing for disguise. We now see that our club members are at the amusement park where we see a bunch of ladies in peacock costumes. Where the Doka brothers are staring at them, wondering in shock if they're not cold wearing swimsuits outside. Now remember, they're from an orphanage, so that question does make sense. As the other two look at them like a bunch of dummy heads staring at women, we see that in the background while Yuna is thinking, Peter is getting approached by females once more. Then we get a little bit of a review of what is the mission looking like and the location of the kidnapping, who is the target, and that's all the information they got out of the mission. But then, still, Yuna finds it difficult as she doesn't even have a clue what she's supposed to do first, when she looks at our main character wondering how does he have the face of someone with confidence, as if he knows what's going on already. When we shift scenes to them trying to get into an amusement park ride, the owner tells them that he's unable to give them seats as they do not have reservations. The others are shocked that you need reservations to ride a roller coaster nowadays. Then they try to look at their budget to see if they can afford any other rides after, while the Doka brothers are busy having a fun time on kids' rides. Comment RIP in the comments for the horses, cause damn they got endurance. Then we see them playing go-karts with a bunch of kids, which just makes them look even more ridiculous. Meanwhile, Peter and Yuna have their own game to play at a shooting game for stuffed animals, but then we see the owner actually intends to rig their game so that he can generate money out of them. When Yuna grabs a gun, thinking on how she's never used a gun before, a fake one that is. And to no surprise, we see that the two actually ended up winning all of the prized animals, leaving the owner flabbergasted as he lays on the floor. Moreover, we see Peter standing alone, looks at the others telling him to hurry otherwise he'll miss out on the fun. He thinks to himself that everybody's having a good time, as he should know that they've probably been through the worst training back at organization training. So he left them enjoying themselves because he knows that every moment of joyousness is precious to them, as they'll never know when they'll be able to enjoy another moment like this. Then we see that Yuna is sitting by herself on a bench when she checks on her phone. She sees something shocking. She gets an earpod signal with the name that says Yoon-gyo Choi, which is the sponsor's son, and she wonders why she's getting a signal, thinking that maybe he's around here. Trying to relocate him, the signal takes her to the woman's bathroom, which immediately raises her suspicious levels as she enters the place. We also see another female looking at herself in the mirror across Yuna. In her mind, Yuna concludes that the signal is coming from the girl, then she approaches her, trying to fake a smile. But then it ends up looking like a creepy face of a serial killer, which she's not wrong. She asks the girl where she got her earpods, which sends the girl into a scream. Then the boyfriend of the girl comes out of the woman's bathroom. Then the man, trying to defend his girl, comes up to Yuna, now trying to threaten her if she was trying to hit on his girl. To cement his anger, he then comes in with a big slap. We go back to our group of boys wondering where Yuna has been, thinking that she's probably stuffing her face with food. But even though they're worried, they know that Yuna can take care of herself, as we can clearly see her evading the guy's slap and ends up climbing on top of him and grabbing him by the neck and taking out the lollipop which she was sucking, and she almost shoves the stick inside of the guy's ear, which could have killed him in an instant, but then she snaps out of it, remembering she is on a mission. She then gets off the guy, puts the lollipop in his mouth, which makes him shut up. Then she asks her victim one more time, where did she get her earpods? Then we shift scenes, and this time we see that this man is even rizzing up birds now, not just men and women. Moreover, we see that Yuna comes back to the group with the earpods. With a new discovery, she makes another suggestion that the likely possibility of somebody being kidnapped would have been in a place where nobody would have been suspicious. And on Peter's phone, she sees that there's a haunted house still up for grabs for people to visit, They head out knowing that's the best place to do a crime without raising suspicion. And inside of the place, they begin observing the place, keeping their guards up as well, making sure to look out for anything suspicious and prepare for any Uden attack. We see that Peter is leading the pack when he gets a strange feeling, as it doesn't make sense that there's in there except for them. He tells the others to be ready for anything, as it looks like this is where their mission really starts. Then the others start questioning him if they're really doing their job right now. When we get a flashback of what their coach told them, that their first plan of action of the mission is for them to actually get kidnapped. We see them all laying on the ground, passed out by some gas, and an unknown figure steps out. As one of our side characters closes their eyes, and we see only the legs of the figure. We shift scenes, and we see the coach coming in shouting to abort the mission, asking where the kids are to one of his students. When his pupil tells him he's lost all communication with them, assures the coach that their students will be fine. Is they're not fine because we find out the reason for his abrupt entrance and his nervousness is because the man who's behind the kidnapping is Sungdu Park, and we learn that Sungdu Park was one of the nominations for the 12 Apostles, but even he couldn't be handled, so eventually he was kicked out of the organization completely. But then the student just laughs it off, as he thinks their club members are not to be looked down upon, as they were trained by coach himself, and thinks that their students might be able to take him on. But with a clear look of nervousness on the teacher's face, we can tell that Sungdu Park is not meant to be messed with. As his student questions him with a look of concern, asking why he's so nervous, we see that back at an unknown hideout, we spot Yuna and Peter tied up to a pillar. When an unknown man with glasses and an apron welcomes them into his humble abode. Back at the coach, he tells his study to immediately abort the mission because Sungdu Park is a psychopath whom the kids won't be able to handle. When he pulls out his leg, and instead of a human leg he has a prosthetic one. This leaves the pupil terrified, and immediately he tries to find a way to stop the mission, but he can't get a connection on them. Now leaves the question, what's Peter gonna pull off now?